Our YouTube, we are back once again to talk about some FF7, I suppose. It could kind of be anything from Square Enix, really, but we have another gaming event to kind of put our focus on, potentially, and it's a rumored state of play for the end of September. It could potentially be a PlayStation showcase. Regardless, it's a PlayStation event rumored for the end of September. It comes as courtesy of Jeff Grubb and the Giant Bomb podcast they did on August 18th. About 20 or so minutes into the podcast is whenever he mentions the potential of a PlayStation event at the end of September.
I guess on that front, I'll point out I've heard, and this one I feel comfortable saying, yeah, you can go write headlines about this if you want. They're planning a state of play or maybe a showcase, but probably a state of play for the end of September or before the end of September.
So again, we have another gaming event to add to the list of potential locations for something for Part 3 in the month of September too, right? Again, when we're supposed to potentially get some Part 3 stuff based on what Toriyama said last year for the second anniversary of Ever Crisis. Here we are. Again, PAX West at the end of the month. I keep mentioning in videos. It's a small possibility. It's a maybe, right? It probably won't be there, but you never know what Square Enix might do. They could, for some reason, announce it there. In the beginning of next month, we have the September 5th live stream, the second anniversary for Ever Crisis celebration thing, whatever. It's a possibility. I know some people are doubting it because they think it's an Ever Crisis anniversary live stream, they wouldn't do anything outside of Ever Crisis, but that's not entirely true. A lot of Ever Crisis is your typical mobile gotcha bullshit, right? But there is the retelling of the FF7 story and Crisis Core, but also First Soldier, which is the new story, the new lore, the backstory for characters like young Sephiroth, young Angeal, obviously introducing us to like Glenn and his crew, right? And if not for that story, like aspects of Rebirth would make sense. Aspects of the Remake trilogy would make sense. They're very much connected, right? Even if it's a live stream celebration for the second anniversary of Ever Crisis, it's still FF7, right? Nobody's going to be surprised or upset or mad if they were to do something to, like, in regards to Part 3, a title reveal, a trailer announcement, something, whatever, right? Like, nobody's going to be surprised by that. And we're obviously not saying anything's going to happen for sure. It's all speculation. We're just kind of looking at what upcoming kind of gaming event stuff, whatever. But that's the one's coming up for sure that is directly connected to FF7, directly connected to the Remake project. I mean, it makes sense that they would maybe do something there. Plus, we have the quote again from Toriyama. And beyond the Ever Crisis live stream, we have Tokyo Game Show, of course, which we've talked about. But now we have this rumored PlayStation event, either a State of Play or PlayStation Showcase. Which a State of Play does seem more likely just because we haven't had a showcase in a while. In more than 2 years. It was like May 2023, I believe, was the last time we had an actual showcase. But bringing it back to the Remake project, of course, those games have been at the PlayStation events plenty of times. As far back as 2015, really, with PlayStation Experience. But with like kind of the re-reveal of Remake back in 2019, the first teaser we got was at a State of Play ahead of the E3 2019, right? And then obviously, like last year, like early February, we got a fucking dedicated State of Play for Rebirth, right? So it's very good odds that we could get something at a State of Play. And sometimes people are skeptical of that just because they want to move to like a multi-platform model, right? But more than likely, Part 3 will still have some sort of a timed exclusivity. That remains to be seen. That could be wrong. That could have been changed. Maybe it'll launch on multiple platforms. We got to wait to see that, right? But just because of the first two games, right? Like more than likely there's going to be some sort of timed exclusivity. But also, even if there wasn't, they can have something at a State of Play that is still releasing on other platforms. It's not like every game that's at like a PlayStation Showcase or State of Play is a PlayStation exclusive. Also, as for the idea of there being some sort of PlayStation event at the end of September, like that is pretty much guaranteed because they've had a PlayStation event in the month of September every single year since they started doing this, right? Since 2019, there's been either a State of Play or a Showcase or something, right? So if they didn't do it this year, that'd be the first time in several years. Kind of keep our eyes on that event if nothing happens before then. Jeff did say at the end of September, potentially before September. That puts it around Tokyo Game Show, which is the 25th to the 28th, right? So it could be before, during, or after. That remains to be seen. That's really kind of it for the main part of the video, but something I did want to add in that I've seen people kind of talking about the last day or so is that our boy Gackt might be back. Somebody posted this on Reddit today. I don't know what the original source is, but it says, a few weeks ago, Gackt did say he did voice recordings in a studio he hadn't been to in over 10 years. So that obviously has a portion of the fan base stressing, because a lot of people do not like the character of Genesis. I never really understood it. When I played Crisis Core back in the day, I've talked about this before. I never hated the guy. I never had, like, love for Genesis either. I mean, there's a little bit of tragedy to the character probably, but I just, whatever. He's kind of whatever. He's just there. Kind of weird guy. Obviously, Gackt returning to some sort of recording studio they hadn't been to in more than a decade. That makes people think FF7. I don't know how much voice recording he ever does. Like, that's something you guys could let me know. But he's been credited very, very recently for like Ever Crisis and also the Crisis Core reunion, right? They used his voice lines for those games. I think with Ever Crisis, it was for sure they did the cutscene where Sephiroth fights Angel in Genesis, and obviously Genesis talks in that cutscene, so they probably just pulled that from Crisis Core. But with Crisis Core Reunion, they used, I think, a majority of the original cast. I don't know what all. I think they might have replaced, obviously, the Reno voice actor because he died. I'm not sure if they replaced anybody else at all. But for a lot of years, there was like a rumor or conspiracy or whatever that they would never do like a port or remaster or remake because there was like some sort of tension between Square Enix and Gackt, and I think he also had some legal trouble. I don't remember the full story exactly. And also the character of Genesis is modeled after Gackt, right? To some degree, maybe really it looks a lot like him. I don't know, whatever. So people thought it would never happen, but obviously we eventually got Crisis Core Reunion, and he still was voicing the character. So if they were going to do something with the character of Genesis in either Ever Crisis, which makes sense, we have young Angeal, young Sephiroth, young Genesis just makes some sense, right? And then potentially we could have Genesis in Part 3. In what capacity? I don't know. When it comes to Ever Crisis, a lot of times with the first Soldier chapter, I don't know how often they do it, but they do like a high-quality cinematic at certain points. Maybe every time they release a chapter, I'm not entirely sure. But if they're going to do like a young Genesis, it makes some sense that, Gackt would voice the character. And then also during combat, the characters talk in Japanese, even in the English version, right? I don't know if he'd do all the grunting sounds and all that other shit, but maybe. As for some Remake Part 3 stuff, would he be a part of the story? That I'm not sure of. We obviously got like Vice and Nero with the Yuffie DLC, with episode intermission, right? You wouldn't have expected that. I mean, they're there. We know they're supposed to be there based on the Deep Ground stuff with their Cerberus, whatever, right? But you wouldn't have expected them in the remake story, but they were there. So it's not unheard of. We know the Genesis should be there too, right? Deep Ground. He should be there during the events of FF7. So it wouldn't be impossible for them to put him into the story somehow. I don't know what you would do. If he were to awaken in Midgar at some point during the third game, what does Genesis do in the real world, in the story? I have no idea. They integrated Nero into the story of the episode intermission DLC for Yuffie, and presumably we're going to see him and or Sonon in the third game with Yuffie at some point, right? They're going to bring that back at some point. So there's a decent chance we're going to see Nero in the main story of Part 3. So maybe we could get something with Genesis. For sure, though, we could probably get a VR fight. I thought with Vice in the episode intermission DLC, and he was a part of the story a little bit. He was in some cutscenes or whatever, but you didn't like fight him in the story because it obviously would not make sense for Yuffie and Sonon to be able to beat Vice's ass. Regardless of all that, I wouldn't mind seeing Genesis in the story, just because we know that with the remake shit, they're integrating all the different shit from the compilation, right? They're trying to make a lot of it fit in there. So I wouldn't mind if they put him in the game somehow. And they could be just with, like, Zack stuff, when he's doing the little planet traversal shit with the live stream, right? Going to different worlds or whatever. I wouldn't mind seeing Genesis and also Angeal. Like, that'd be nice. We know Angeal's dead, so he should definitely be in the live stream, right? Genesis is meant to be alive, but these are, like, alternate timelines. And he's also, like, protector of the planet and stuff like that with, like, Minerva and the goddess and all that other stuff. So who's to say he couldn't be in these other worlds, too, potentially? There's a lot they could do with him. I don't know. Imagine we get to the end of the third game and we're about to like lose the fight to like Sephiroth and like the cinematics or some shit, and then in walks Genesis, similar to how Aerith did at the end of Rebirth, right? Imagine his ass walking in and saving the day. That'd piss a lot of people off. Yeah, the main thing Gackt is recording again. Presumably it could be for something for FF7, even if it's just Ever Crisis, right? Voicing maybe some new Genesis lines or something for something that happens in the first Soldier story, or even just like combat dialogue type shit for Genesis. Remains to be seen. What are your thoughts? That's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @davidbusiness. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in